The preseason college football AP top 25 rankings are out, and the Louisville Cardinals did not make the cut, but they should have. However, only one thing matters from this point forward. We'll explain what that is coming up on today's episode of Locked On Louisville.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what is going on? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. I want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, the sports have stopped sporting like we want them to, but throughout the summer, FanDuel is offering all customers a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're getting closer and closer to college football. Just hold on a little bit longer, y'all. The AP Top 25 preseason polls are out. Louisville didn't make the cut. They should have. We will explain what's important moving forward. We'll also give you a 2025 basketball recruiting update. Chris Cenac, Kelvin Odih, and Kaden Magwood. Some notable things to talk about in all three of those recruitments. And then to conclude the show, we'll dive into yet another weekly mailbag. So, big news on Monday afternoon. The preseason college football AP Top 25 polls were released at noon Eastern time, and the Cardinals did not make the list. It felt like the reception of that news amongst the fan base was fairly mixed. There was a portion that was like, it is what it is. And there was another sector of the fan base that was really upset about it. And there was another equally sized portion that was like, okay, we're going to use that as motivation. You know, the country sleeps on us. We're going to surprise everyone. Truth be told, in my opinion, the Cardinals should have made the AP preseason top 25. I think for a team that won 10 regular season games last year, yes, they did have the skid at the end of the season. I understand that, and I guarantee that that had somewhat of a role to play in this. But this was a team that won 10 games. In Jeff Brom's first season, he took over the December before that. You lost a couple pieces, but here's the thing about it is the Cardinals returned a solid amount of really good players. Ashton Gillotte, Quincy Riley, MJ Griffin is back. You had one of the best transfer portal hauls of the offseason for the second straight year. And there's more continuity with Jeff Brom's program. He has a full offseason with those players, and it's going to be a team that resembles more so what he wants the program to look like versus the first year. Nothing wrong with that team in the first year. They won 10 games. But this team should be in the top 25. At the end of the day, however, only one thing matters. That is, it doesn't matter. None of this really matters. Louisville got the most other receiving votes. They had 111. I think Virginia Tech was right beyond them. Technically, right now in the AP poll, the Cardinals are 26th. And if you look at, the schools that are in it, the ACC schools in particular, I know they're not in the ACC, but Notre Dame's at number 7, Florida State at 10, Clemson at 14. You have Miami at 19. NC State snuck in at 24. The Cardinals right beyond that, Virginia Tech at 27. SMU's at 29. You also have Kentucky getting some receiving votes. Needless to say, this does not matter. Sure, it would be nice to get that preseason recognition. And I'm not faulting anyone for feeling some type of way one way or the other about this, but for me personally, my opinion is that I don't care. One thing is true. If you handle business on a week in, week out basis, it will not matter because the recognition and the rankings will come. being like the difference between 20 and 26 before the season even starts, it's not that large. It's not that big of a difference because guess what? It doesn't matter. If you're 20 and you lose to Notre Dame, it doesn't matter. If you're 26 and you beat Notre Dame, if you're 20 and you lose to Notre Dame, obviously it comes down to the win-loss, right? It comes down to, can you handle business? And I know that Louisville fans believe that we can. No fault in believing that. And maybe this team does use this as motivation. And I hope that's the case. Although I don't really, here's the thing about this. You shouldn't have to have a ranking that you feel doesn't justify your team to then motivate you. You should already be motivated internally. Like you shouldn't have to be motivated by external factors. And I'm not saying that Louisville, that's the case for the Cardinals. I'm just saying for those who are like, well, hopefully this motivates Louisville. Yeah, to an extent, but this can't be like the main driving factor behind the motivation. Like there has to be internal motivation mixed into this as well. Like I said, I think that the Cardinals should have been included in the rankings. They're a better team on both sides of the football. They won 10 games in 2023. They returned a good nucleus of players without losing a bunch of key guys to the portal. You lost some guys to the draft, but you had a very, very good transfer portal haul as well. Not to mention, you look at this team position by position, which we did last month, right? We did that last month in the first episode of this month. The only position collectively that you could look at and say, yeah, this position might be worse than it was last year is running back, because you lost Jawar Jordan and Isaac Garendo. But guess what? Maurice Turner and Don Chaney Jr. are going to be, at the very least, a serviceable duo in the ACC. Not to mention Kewan Brown, Isaac Brown are in the mix, maybe even Duke Watson. So it's not like it's a huge drop-off. You're just losing two really good running backs that both got drafted. Louisville was the only school, was the only college that got two running backs to be invited to the NFL Draft Combine, and both were drafted. So I say all that to say that this team all across the board is better. But let's take a look for the rest of the segment into why the Cardinals didn't make it. Like, what are the arguments? What was the devil's advocate for being against Louisville? I think for starters, the appreciation and the overall analytical approach to how good Louisville is going to be, it varies depending on if you're looking at it through a local or a national lens. Like the local media believes that this team is better than it was last season. And you look at quarterback with Tyler Shuck, you look at the receivers, the defense, you bring back Gillotte and Riley. MJ Griffin's back from injury. You bring in a great transfer portal class. That's the thing about it, is the national landscape isn't going to be as high on your team as you are high on your team. That's just the local bias as it relates to being a fan of a team or covering one team. I think that this team is going to win 10 games in 2024. The preseason had the Cardinals ranked fourth in the ACC. They didn't get one single first-place vote. So that just goes to show you the difference in ways of thinking. But there's two reasons why I think Louisville didn't make the top 25. Number one, they have a tougher schedule. That is something that you really can't debate at this point. You have more true road games. Your road games are tougher. Yes, you don't play Florida State again. You don't play NC State, who's going to have a good team. You don't play North Carolina again. But instead of hosting Notre Dame, you're on the road at Notre Dame. You are at home against Miami, but on paper, it seems that Miami is going to be a better team than they were a season ago. At least they're supposed to be. Let's see if Mario Cristobal can turn things around. You play Clemson again. You didn't play him last year, and you're on the road at Death Valley Jr. You've never beaten Clemson in the whole decade that you've been in the conference. That would have to change this season. It's going to be a tougher game. You're at Kentucky this season. You have Georgia Tech, who's going to be a decent opponent. You have SMU. SMU is going to be, I think, pretty good. So you look at the road games alone. The Cardinals had 4 games last year at NFL stadiums where the atmosphere wasn't really all that threatening. Like, it wasn't really like a hostile atmosphere. Like the hostile atmospheres that Louisville played against played in 2023 at NC State on a Friday night was a little tough. Outside of that, that was their only true road game that came at a legitimate college stadium. At Pittsburgh was at the Steelers Stadium. Miami was at the Dolphins Stadium. They technically only had 3 road games. This is a little different this season. So the schedule is one reason why I don't think that they made the top 25 because, yeah, the team might be a little better, but it's a tougher schedule. Maybe there's not much belief into this team. And I also think that the national media is not, I hate to say this, not sold on Tyler Shuck as the Cardinals quarterback. And Kenton Gibbs in the Locked On ACC season preview, he said something that kind of turned my head. He said, I feel like most people believe in Tyler Shuck as a player with the talent, but he has just been so unreliable when it comes to staying on the field, whether, it's bad injury luck or recurring issues. Signs would point to the former. It still is injuries. And until he can put a full season together, it's really hard to, put so much trust into the quarterback. And the quarterback, you have to get that right. Thankfully, they had a little bit of a weaker schedule where a game manager at quarterback like Jack Plummer was able to get you 10 wins, even though they relied a ton on the rushing department. Mixture between the schedule and the quarterback health concerns, if you will. I think that's why Louisville didn't make the top 25, combined with them. The media have a bad perception of the team with how they dropped the last 3 games. They should be in the top 25, in my opinion. But again, the moral of this segment, it doesn't matter. Handle business, and you'll get back in those rankings fairly quickly. If you win the first 2 games, you're probably ranked by the time you play Georgia Tech in the technical week 4 of the season. But again, don't get too caught up in that. We are going to turn our attention to the basketball recruiting side of things, give you a 2025 basketball recruiting update on various prospects that the Cardinals are recruiting. We'll deliver that here coming up in the next segment of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them probably too much, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. We're in the dog days of summer. For now, college football is less than 3 weeks away. Sports have stopped supporting like I want them to, but for the time being, FanDuel has continued to let me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app, and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood, because with the daily boosts or bonuses that I can see on FanDuel.com, whether it's MLB or WNBA, this week has some great boosts and bonuses. Head to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And heading into the second segment of this fine Tuesday edition of the show, we're going to deliver a brief but notable 2025 college basketball recruiting update for Pat Kelsey and the Cardinals. 3 prospects have made some notable developments in their recruitments that we need to break down. It starts out with the number 1 center in the country, Chris Cenac. Like I mentioned, top 15 player, number 1 center in the country. He has cut his list to 12. Now, I understand some look at this and say, 12? Are we serious? That's sort of what we're going with? It's not much, but it is something. In those 12, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Baylor, Michigan State, UConn, Tennessee, Houston, and Texas. So far, he has unofficially visited Houston and LSU as it relates to Louisville, and in connection with LSU, his relationship with now Louisville head or assistant coach Ronnie Hamilton, who spent time on staff in Baton Rouge. That has landed the Cardinals on this list. Now, there really doesn't seem to be a leader in this recruitment yet. However, he is looking to schedule his official visits coming up. He has an early November commitment date scheduled. So Louisville needs to work hard to get that official visit. He is a high ceiling prospect. Honestly, has probably one of the highest ceilings in the class. Affects the game in many different ways. Has solidified himself as among the elite of the elite in this class. Really solid shot blocker. Runs the court well. Perimeter shooter for his 6'11" frame or 6'10" frame. Went from New Orleans up to Branson, Missouri. Will play for Link Academy, which will be interesting to see if Louisville can get more involved in this recruitment. But the main thing now going for the Cardinals is the possibility of adding that official visit. That's something that you have to get if you want a chance in this recruitment. Maybe this isn't the most significant development out there, but it sure beats not being inside of the top 12. So I would imagine that before he makes his commitment, he's going to cut his list down once, maybe even a couple more times before that early November scheduled commit date. Hopefully Louisville is included in those. Moving on to the next one is Kelvin, I believe it's Odih is how it's pronounced. It's Odih. Odih is from Connecticut, plays at South Kent High School, ranked pretty much anywhere from 53 to about 118. He's 75th in the 24/7 sports composite, 6'4", shooting guard / small forward. He just cut his list to 6. And obviously, if you can't tell, with the trend, the Cardinals are in that top 6. They are in it with Creighton, West Virginia, Colorado, Ohio State, Oklahoma State, and Rutgers. The Cardinals just offered back on July 26th, and being in this list just a couple weeks after offering, I think that that's pretty key. Unfortunately, it seems like they're on the outside looking in at this moment because currently on August 13th, there isn't an official visit scheduled. You have Creighton, Colorado, and Rutgers all getting official visits for the month of September. I believe he's taken an official visit to Marquette, if I'm not mistaken, but they're not in that top 6. Louisville would basically, like I said, I feel like a broken record here, and if I am, I'm sorry. You have to get the official visits because if you don't get the player on campus, it's really going to be a challenge to get that player to commit to your school. To give you a little glimpse into the player that they are recruiting here, he's a standout on the Puma circuit, which is pretty interesting. Has a growing offensive repertoire. His upside as a collegiate athlete pertains more so to the defensive side. He has the potential to be one of the best on-ball defenders in the entire class, and extremely athletic. The offensive game is continually growing and refining, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it continues to develop over the next couple of months. So again, Louisville needs to see about getting an official visit in this recruitment. Speaking of official visits, we end with the third prospect we'll talk about. That is Louisville native Kaden Magwood. Magwood, it depends on who you talk to, because in a tweet he told League Ready, which is a publication out of Chicago, that he was scheduling official visits and that Louisville was going to get that official visit on August 23rd. But if you talk to some local recruiting insiders, they say nothing's been scheduled yet. In fact, it doesn't seem like Magwood is high up on the priority list for the Cardinals. So it really just depends on who you talk to. Hopefully the former are correct. I would love to see Kaden Magwood in that Louisville Red, continually rising up the rankings just outside of the top 50 now. Wake Forest and Mississippi really getting involved here. And he's, so to speak, having rumored to schedule all these official visits. But it's pretty interesting to see if that's going to be the case because of the conflicting reports as it relates to that. So, and he actually retweeted the tweet that said that he scheduled those visits. So we'll see exactly what happens. Hopefully by then we won't have any more confusion and that he does make that official visit. As it stands right now, that post would lead you to believe that the Cardinals would get the first official visit in the sequence. So something to keep an eye out on. Nothing groundbreaking, but still wanted to keep you up to date on what was going on in the basketball recruiting side of things. So if something were to happen and a player were to schedule an official visit or even make a commitment, then you can sort of point back to these segments and think, oh, yeah, we heard about that guy. So that's going to wrap up the update. Not the episode, however. We still have a weekly mailbag to dive into. We'll answer the questions that you all have presented coming up on the final segment of the show. Today's episode of the show is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or you get your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fits only available to U.S. customers. And here we are into the final segment of this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast, diving into the weekly mailbag. Thank you all for submitting your questions. If you have a question that you would like answered on next week's Monday or weekly mailbag, whenever day that airs, be sure to drop it in the YouTube comments below. A couple questions. First one is Jeff Lightsey tweeted out that there was some Louisville recruiting news that would be shared within the week. Do you have any idea of what that was? Jeff Lightsey, a person within the Louisville media realm, hosts a show on ESPN Radio, I believe, ESPN Louisville or 93.9, whichever one. He made a tweet saying that there's some recruiting news on the horizon. I'm not sure what that is, so I'm intrigued as you all are as it relates to what that development could be. So hopefully it's good news. Louisville Live is at the Yum Center this season. Thoughts on the program bringing the event back and thoughts on the venue? I like that they bring it back. I mean, I think that, you need to build the excitement. Past couple of years, it felt like maybe the excitement was shallow, but this year there's genuine buzz, especially after the Bahamas trip. So I think that having Louisville Live would be a great opportunity for a new head coach and 13 new players on a team that's never played at the Yum Center or never played for the team in the Yum Center. And then having it at the Yum, I love that. I love it because I think that you can, pack it reasonably. The lower bowl for certain, maybe even some of the upper bowl, depending on, just overall attendance. But I like it. You don't have to worry about the environment being a factor. The visibility of the court is something that has been an issue sometimes. I think that's as good of a venue as you can have it. Some are worried, we won't fill up the bowl as much. There's a lot of buzz surrounding this team. I'll be in attendance at Louisville Live, and I'm really excited to see the team come out and be able to interact with the fan base and just continue to increase that momentum heading into the season, keeping the juice alive within the program and keep this program buzzing. So, going over to the football side of things, I should say, I feel like I get a variation of this question every mailbag, and I'm okay with answering that. But the question is, if I were to tell you that Louisville loses to a team that they're not supposed to this season, who do you think it would be? I mean, it depends on what you consider that to be. I'm going to once again go with the SMU Mustangs. I think Louisville's probably going to be favored in that game. It's a home game. The Cardinals could be ranked depending on what happens against Notre Dame and Georgia Tech for that matter. But SMU is going to be a lot better than people think, just because people just aren't really familiar with Rhett Lashley's program. I think that that's the team that technically Louisville would be favored against, that I could see them losing, the most realistically speaking. So continuing on along, Tyler Shuck ranked inside of your top 10. Sell me on why you think that he should be in the rankings, because, like you mentioned, the statistics don't back it up. Yeah, so I think that, it's the eye test. It is when you watch him play, when you watch the film, he does stuff on the football field that is extremely special. And when it comes to an older player, sometimes, the older they get, the less likely they're going to become a player that they're not and break out onto the scene. For Shuck, it's been injury-wise. So if he can stay healthy, there's no doubt in my mind that he's one of the most talented players on this team. That's what lands him in the top 10, and the impact and production he's going to have too. So it's just mainly the eye test and intuition, and all signs out of fall camp have pointed to him being the real deal. So excited for that. It seems like the narrative for Chris Bell becoming this team's best wide receiver is growing and growing. Okay, that's pretty much the question. That it does seem like there's become more of an appreciation for Chris Bell. Chris Bell is in the top 15 players on this team, regardless of position. Is there a world where he is the number one receiver? Yeah, I think that Bell is a fantastic player who had a breakout season. I think he's primed to take that next step forward, and the Cardinals are going to rely on him. But I think that, there's a good amount of guys to feed the ball to: Ja'Cory Brooks, Colin Lacey. I think that Lacey's probably going to get the majority of the targets. He's going to be sort of the focal point of the offense. So, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't think that that's going to be the case. I think Bell, just because he's a wide receiver 3, in my opinion, or wide receiver 2, doesn't take away the talent. I'm not diminishing the role that he could play, because Louisville has a really good top 3 core up at the top of the receiving position. Who's one guy on each side of the football that you haven't heard talked about at all this season or this offseason that you think can surprise people? That's tough, because I'm a football junkie or a sports junkie, and the people that I talk about pretty much everybody on the team. I think offensively, nobody's talked about. That's kind of really, really challenging, because the players that you think could be dark horses are just being talked about. I'm going to go with a guy I think JoJo Stone, freshman receiver. Same thing with him. If he can stay healthy, he's really talented, and he has played really well in Louisiana and Georgia, to where maybe he could find an early role on this team. Defensively, a little bit more challenging, a player that hasn't been talked about. Oh, man. Sheesh. It's not that he hasn't been talked about. It's that it just hasn't been a lot of things. Blake Ruffin, transfer from Eastern Illinois, Louisville native, won a couple state titles at Trinity. A 6'2" safety that was one of the better players in coverage at the position in his conference this year. I think he's the guy on defense that I would go with. But that is going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you.